if we have that attitude, we're not right. We've got to get on our knees and say, Lord, help me long to be with you. Hello everyone, Rejoicing Bones here, outside my house, just about ready to go for a walk and fulfill my promise to you last week to cover a mental health topic for Mental Health Awareness Month. And before I do, I just want to go ahead and show you a bit of my view today. I come out of my back door and have these beautiful roses. Just a magnificent life for spring. So I'm taking you for a short walk. Have to be careful, it's a pretty busy road here. So, this is what I want to talk about. I don't want to talk about someone else's death, but I do want to talk about ours. Grieving over someone else's death is a bit too complicated right now. But I do want to talk about our own death. Gotta find a place to sit. So bear with me. I was just reading though in the book of Philippians, chapter 1. First thing I'd like to say is I think there are about maybe three kinds of people in the world. Let's say Christians, three kinds of Christians in the world. First kind doesn't think about death at all. They avoid it. It's an unpleasant topic for them. They fear death, perhaps. I think it's fairly normal. I think we're supposed to fear death a little bit, otherwise we'd all be maybe a bit too reckless. God doesn't want us to be that way. Another kind of person is a person who thinks about death too often, but with the wrong, unhealthy approach to it. And then, third kind of person I submit to you is a person who thinks about death often, daily, yet has the attitude that the Apostle Paul has. Paul writes to his brothers and sisters in Philippi while he's in prison, and he is facing possible death penalty, and that's the context in which Paul's writing here. He says, I eagerly expect and hope that I will in no way be ashamed, but will have sufficient courage so that now, as always, Christ will be exalted in my body, whether by life or by death. Just a quick note. You notice he says whether by life or by death. God can be exalted through either one of those situations. Whether we're living or if we're dying at the moment, he can be exalted. I'll get to that in a second. He says, if I am to go on living in the body, this would be fruitful labor for me. Yet, what shall I choose? I do not know. I am torn between the two. I desire to depart and be with Christ, which is far better. Now, Paul is saying this because he doesn't like what's going on. He's suffering. He has trials he's going through, some of which I'm sure are painful, some of which is persecution and imprisonment. But that's not why he wants to depart so much, I guess. I'm going to think so anyway, because I'm going to turn around this way. You see, Paul knows that being with Christ is better. It doesn't matter what the situation is. And I think as Christians, we really, really need to think about this. Do we wake up every day and say, I really want to be with Christ? Now here's the next piece. We don't want to be with Christ, I suggest, in order to get out of something. This is why I'm thinking about this. You see, when I was getting home from the U.S. a few months ago, I was trying to get off some pain medication because the leg that's not there burns really, really badly sometimes. The pain's pretty much unbearable. But I didn't want to be on these medications because they're not good for your body. I got off the meds for a bit. But then after about 3 weeks, the pain rose to really new heights. Just bad. It wasn't good. And I was so fatigued, so worn out from this battle. I was tired of life, to be honest with you. I found life exhausting after 4.5 years of trying to find a new normal after the accident and after the amputation. So I was really just wanting to quit. Wasn't very long ago. You might have seen a video about it. But I just wanted to be done. I kept saying to folks, I want to go home. I really meant it. And I said to myself, is that a good thing? Should I be thinking this way? I was wondering, is it really healthy? Is it healthy to be not quite obsessed, but really just wanting it? So of course, I thought of the Bible and looked in there for an answer. Is it right to think this way? And this is the passage that kept coming to my mind. I kept seeing Paul saying that he'd rather be with Christ. It's far better. So what's wrong with me wishing for the same thing? I'm going to read the rest of the passage starting at verse 24. I'm in chapter 1 in case you didn't notice, but it says, but it is more necessary for you that I remain in the body. Convinced of this, I know that I will remain, and I will continue with all of you for your progress and joy in the faith. Paul is more concerned about what other people could get out of his being alive. That's important. If you've ever had a bout with suicidal ideation, let me just encourage you that if Christ wants you home, you'll go home. Meanwhile, we have to assume that he wants us to be exalted in our lives. At the same time, I really think we should be like Paul, actually going so far as to desire to depart in a healthy way, desire to be with him. I was sitting in a room with a bunch of Christians one day, and they were talking about Jesus' second coming. They were all asking if they were ready for it, if they wanted him to come back. I'm not kidding. Everyone in the room did not want him to come back yet. They were looking forward to things happening in their lives. Kids getting married, or grandchildren coming along, or all sorts of different things. And I know his second coming isn't death, but it's the same thing. It's the thing that will usher us into the presence of Christ. And folks, I'm telling you, if we have that attitude, we're not right. We've got to get on our knees and say, Lord, help me long to be with you. Help me long to be in your presence and glorifying you and worshiping you. That's anything that could happen on this earth, anything that could happen is absolutely nothing compared to being in the presence of Christ. That's what life is about. So let me encourage you, no matter what you're going through, let's shift that focus. Let's be longing to be with Christ, but exalting Him in our bodies while we're still alive. And that's where we'll find joy. That's how we'll find joy. Just a quick summary. We could be a person who doesn't think about death enough. We don't want that. We want to be thinking and looking forward to Christ coming or being with Him, however way it goes. We could be a person who obsesses over death, thinks about it in an unhealthy way, in a way that is described by some as suicidal ideation. Where I was, we don't want to be that way either. It's not healthy. It also it brings us low, and we don't want to present that way as a Christian, if we can help it. And lastly, we want to be a Christian. The third way is we want to be, let's try that again. And lastly, we can be that third person, that person who really looks forward to seeing Jesus again. We're not afraid to die. We welcome it if it happens. As Susanna Wesley, I think, said, we could be someone who dies well. I pray that as Christians in the 21st century Western world, where we have very little to struggle with compared to some in other places in the world, we be the Christians who still don't hold on to this life, but we hold on to the life to come. One last thing I want to say. I hope it doesn't sound judgmental if you're a person who's in either of those categories. We can get in all sorts of places and mental states. So we'll be praying for you that you'll think about this in a new way today, thanks to what Paul says in Philippians chapter 1. Be joyful, be restored. I hope the trains haven't been too much of a disruption. Over and out.